There is a moment in the Gospel of John, chapter 11, verse 35, that is famous for being the shortest verse in the entire Bible. 2 words, just 2. Jesus wept. Every Sunday school child learns that verse. It gets quoted. It gets cross-stitched onto pillows. It appears on refrigerator magnets and inspirational social media posts. But almost nobody talks about what is happening immediately before those 2 words. His friend Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. The tomb is sealed. The mourners are weeping around him. And Jesus, who, according to everything the Gospel of John has been arguing for 11 chapters, is the Son of God, the Word made flesh, the one through whom all things were made, asks to be taken to the tomb. And the people around him say, "Lord, come and see." And Jesus weeps, not because he does not know what he is about to do. He has already told Martha, moments before, "I am the resurrection and the life." He already knows. He is walking toward a miracle that will shake the entire city of Jerusalem. And he still weeps. He weeps because the people he loves are weeping. He weeps because death is real and grief is real, and the gap between the world as it is and the world as it should be is real. And he feels that gap in his body the same way we do. And then he raises Lazarus from the dead. I have been thinking about why that detail, the weeping before the miracle, matters so much. And I keep coming back to the same answer. Because it means the miracles of Jesus are not cold demonstrations of divine power. They are not theological arguments dressed up as events. They are not cosmic proof that the right doctrine is correct. They are acts of love, every single one of them. From the water turned to wine at a wedding in Cana to the moment he walked out of a sealed tomb on a Sunday morning, is driven not by a desire to impress or to prove or to overwhelm, but by a response to human need, human pain, human longing. Today, we are going through all of them. Every miracle Jesus performed in the Bible, every one that the Gospel writers recorded, every healing, every restoration, every impossible reversal of the natural order. We are going to sit inside each one and ask not just what happened, but why, what it meant for the person who received it, and what it might mean for you, right now, today. Because I have come to believe that the miracles of Jesus are not just history. They are a portrait, a window into the character of the one who performed them. And if you understand that character, if you really understand it, it changes everything about how you approach the hardest moments of your own life. Welcome to All Religious Story, and let us begin. Before we go story by story, I want to give you a framework for understanding what miracles actually are in the Gospel accounts. Because the word miracle is one of those words that has been used so many times, in so many different contexts, that it has almost stopped meaning anything. In the Gospels, particularly in the Gospel of John, the miracles of Jesus are called by a specific Greek word, semeion, signs, not just wonders, not just power displays, signs. A sign, in the ancient world, was not the event itself. A sign pointed to something beyond itself. A road sign is not the destination. It points you toward the destination. A shop sign is not the goods inside. It tells you what you will find if you go in. John says explicitly, at the end of his gospel, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. These are written so that you may believe. Every miracle in the Gospels is a sign pointing toward something. The healing of a blind man points toward Jesus as the light of the world. The feeding of 5,000 points toward Jesus as the bread of life. The raising of Lazarus points toward Jesus as the resurrection and the life. The miracles are not random demonstrations of power. They are a coherent, deliberate, carefully arranged argument, told in events, rather than words, about who Jesus is and what he came to do. Once you see that, once you hold the framework, the miracles stop being a list of impressive things and become something much richer. A sustained piece of communication. A love letter written in healings and storms and loaves and fish and restored lives. Now, let us read it. There is something quietly wonderful about the fact that the very first miracle Jesus performed in the Gospel of John, the one John specifically calls the first of his signs, happened at a party, a wedding, in Cana. The wine has run out. In first-century Jewish culture, this was not just an inconvenience. Running out of wine at a wedding was a serious social failure for the host family, the kind of thing that would be talked about for years, the kind of shame that lingered. Mary, the mother of Jesus, comes to him and says simply, "They have no wine." That is the entirety of her request. No instructions, no demands, no "fix this." Just, "They have no wine." And Jesus says, and this is one of those exchanges that has puzzled readers for centuries, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." He calls her woman, not disrespectfully. It is a formal address in the Greek, like calling someone ma'am, but not the way a son normally addresses his mother. And he seems to be pushing back. And then Mary, apparently completely undeterred by this response, turns to the servants and says, "Do whatever he tells you." She does not argue. She does not plead. She just tells the servants to listen to whatever Jesus says next. And Jesus does it. He tells the servants to fill 6 stone water jars with water. Each jar holds 20 to 30 gallons. They fill them to the brim. He tells them to draw some out and take it to the master of the feast. The water has become wine. And not just wine. The master of the feast calls it the best wine of the whole evening. The wine that guests normally serve first, before people have had enough to stop noticing the difference. This, the best wine, is the wine that came from stone water jars that were full of water 20 minutes ago. Now, why does this matter? Why is this the first sign? Because, and this is the thing most people miss, those stone water jars were not decorative. They were ceremonial washing jars. The kind used for Jewish purification rituals, for religious cleansing. And Jesus fills them with wine. He takes the vessels of religious ritual and fills them with the joy of celebration. He takes the containers of obligation and fills them with delight. The first sign of Jesus, in the gospel that will spend 21 chapters arguing that he is the fulfillment of everything Israel's religion was pointing toward, is the transformation of ritual water into the best wine anyone has ever tasted. If you have ears to hear, this sign is saying something profound about the entire mission that is just beginning. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. Of all the miracles of Jesus, which one do you find yourself coming back to the most? The one that you read and think, yes, that one. That one is for me. Drop it in the comments below. Just the name, or a few words about why. I read all of them. Every single one. And sometimes the conversation in the comments section of a video like this is more powerful than the video itself. If you are new here, please subscribe. Every week on this channel, we go into the stories that shape the world, the Bible, the Quran, the prophets, and we go deep. We do not skim. We do not do surface-level summaries. We sit inside the stories until they start to move. And I want you here for what is coming. Because we are just getting started, and the miracles ahead of us, some of them are going to hit differently than you expect. Let us keep going. John 4. A royal official comes to Jesus. His son is sick, dying, actually. And the man has traveled, on foot, a day's journey, from Capernaum to Cana just to find Jesus. And when he finds him, he begs him to come and heal his son before he dies. Jesus says something that, on the surface, sounds almost cold. Unless you people see signs and wonders, you will never believe. But the official does not take the bait. He does not get defensive. He does not try to prove his faith. He just says, "Sir, come down before my child dies." That is everything. That is the entire prayer. Come, before it is too late. And Jesus says, "Go, your son will live." The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, and he went. He did not ask for Jesus to come with him. He did not ask for proof. He did not stand there and wait for some sign that the miracle had actually happened. He simply received the word and walked home. And while he was still on the road, his servants meet him. "Your son lives." He asks what time the boy began to get better. The 7th hour of the previous day, they say. And the father recognizes that was the exact hour when Jesus said to him, "Your son will live." I want to stay with something here. The miracle happened at a distance, miles away, before the father even got home, before any touch, any prayer spoken over the boy, any hand laid on him. The miracle happened the moment Jesus spoke. That tells us something about the nature of what we are dealing with. This is not a healer who needs physical proximity to operate. This is not someone whose power diminishes with distance. The word went out, and what the word commanded happened. In John's theology, this is deeply significant, because John's gospel begins, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God." And here, in this story, the Word speaks, and life returns where death was approaching. The sign points toward itself. John 5. Jerusalem, a pool called Bethesda with 5 covered colonnades. Around this pool, a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, lying on the ground, waiting. The tradition at this pool was that occasionally an angel would stir the water, and whoever stepped in first would be healed. So all these people were gathered there, day after day, waiting for the moment the water moved. And one man there had been lying by that pool for 38 years. Jesus sees him lying there. He knows how long he has been there, and he asks him a question that, again, seems strange at first. "Do you want to be healed? Do you want to be healed?" He has been lying by a healing pool for 38 years. Of course he wants to be healed. Why would Jesus ask that? Because, and I think this is one of the most psychologically profound moments in all of the Gospels, the man does not actually answer the question. He does not say yes. He says, "Sir, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." He gives an explanation for why healing has not happened. Not an affirmation of desire for healing. There are people who have been in the same difficult situation for so long that the situation has become their identity. They are no longer sure who they would be without it. The 38 years at the pool is not just a medical history. It is, in some way, who this man is. And Jesus does not analyze this, does not point it out, does not give him a therapy session. He just says, "Get up, take up your bed, and walk." And immediately the man was healed. He took up his bed and walked. And here is the detail that most people skip past. The religious leaders see this man carrying his bed on the Sabbath, when it was forbidden to carry objects, and they are angry. They ask who told him to do this. He does not know Jesus' name yet. He did not ask for the healing. He did not seek Jesus out. Jesus found him, healed him, and left before the man even learned who had done it. No credit taken. No public moment. Just a man who had been lying there for 38 years, walking home carrying his mat. Sometimes the most generous acts of love are the ones that happen when nobody is watching, and no one asks for thanks. This is the only miracle, apart from the resurrection, recorded in all 4 gospel accounts. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all tell this story, which tells you something about how significant the early church considered it to be. The crowd has been following Jesus. A great crowd. The Gospel of John specifies 5,000 men, which means with women and children, the actual number was likely 10,000 or more. They have been with him all day. They are tired. They are in a remote place. Evening is coming. And Jesus turns to Philip, one of his disciples, and says, "Where are we to buy bread, so that these people may eat?" John adds a note here that I love. He says Jesus said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. He already knows what he is going to do. He is not actually asking Philip for logistics. He is asking Philip a question to see what Philip will say. Philip's answer is entirely reasonable. 200 denarii would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. 200 denarii was roughly 8 months of wages for a working man. Even that would not be enough. Andrew, Peter's brother, finds a boy in the crowd. There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. And then Andrew adds, "But what are they for so many? What are they for so many?" That is the question of every person who has ever felt that what they have to offer is embarrassingly insufficient for the scale of what needs to be done. Jesus says, "Have the people sit down." He takes the loaves. He gives thanks. He distributes to the people. And they all eat as much as they want. And when they are satisfied, he tells the disciples to gather up the leftovers. 12 baskets full. 5 loaves. 2 fish. 10,000 people fed. 12 baskets remaining. I have thought about why there were 12 baskets left over. 12, the same number as the disciples. 1 basket each. As if Jesus is saying to each of the people who stood there with empty hands and said, "What is this for so many? Here, take a basket. Carry it home." Remember what happens when you give what you have. You always end up with more than you started with. Same night, same lake. Jesus has sent the disciples ahead in the boat, while he stays behind to dismiss the crowd and pray. Evening comes. The boat is far out on the lake, and the wind is against them. The disciples have been rowing for hours. They are exhausted. The waves are battering the boat. And somewhere in the 4th watch of the night, between 3 and 6 in the morning, Jesus comes to them, walking on the sea. And they are terrified. They think he is a ghost. They cry out in fear. And immediately Jesus speaks. "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And then, in Matthew's account, which adds the detail the other Gospels leave out, Peter calls out, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus says, "Come." And Peter gets out of the boat, and he walks on the water toward Jesus. I want to stop there for a moment, because we spend a lot of time talking about what happens next. Peter taking his eyes off Jesus, seeing the wind, beginning to sink, crying out, "Lord, save me." But first, Peter gets out of the boat. The other 11 disciples did not get out of the boat. They sat and watched. And Peter, impulsive, passionate, foot-in-mouth Peter, swings his legs over the side and steps onto a lake in the middle of the night in a windstorm. That took something. Whatever we say about Peter sinking, he is the only human being in the history of the world, besides Jesus, who ever walked on water. He sinks because he gets afraid. He takes his eyes off Jesus and puts them on the wind. And in the moment he does, gravity reasserts its claim on him. Jesus reaches out his hand immediately, catches him. "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And they get into the boat, and the wind ceases. Here is what I take from this story. Not the obvious lesson about keeping your eyes on Jesus, which is true and important, but something slightly different. Jesus said, "Come." He invited Peter out of the boat. He did not say, "Sit tight, I will be there in a moment." He said, "Come." Sometimes the miracle requires you to step onto the water first. We are right in the middle of this journey together, and I want to pause and ask you, is there a boat you need to get out of right now? Something you have been sitting in, safe, stable, familiar, while something is out there on the water waiting for you to come. I am not asking you to be reckless. I am asking because this story, every time I come back to it, refuses to let me stay comfortable. Peter on the water, even sinking, is more alive in that moment than any of the 11 who never got out of the boat. Tell me in the comments, what is your boat? What is the water? I want to know. And if this video is landing somewhere real for you, please share it with someone. One person, who might need to hear about a man who walked on water before he sank, and was caught before he went under. Now, let us keep going, because some of the most important miracles are still ahead. John 9. One of the longest miracle accounts in any of the Gospels, and one of the most theologically rich. Jesus and his disciples pass a man who has been blind from birth. And the disciples ask, and this question reveals so much about how people in that culture thought about suffering. "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Who sinned? Because in the framework the disciples were working with, suffering was punishment. If something bad happened to you, someone must have done something to deserve it. Jesus says, it was not that this man sinned, or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. He rejects the entire framework. This man's blindness is not a punishment. It is not the result of anyone's failure. It is, in the language Jesus uses, an opportunity for something to be revealed. And then Jesus spits on the ground, makes mud with the saliva, and puts the mud on the man's eyes, and tells him to go wash in the pool of Siloam. The man goes. He washes. He comes back seen. And this is where the story becomes extraordinary, because the miracle is almost the beginning, not the end. The neighbors start arguing about whether this is even the same man. He looks like the blind beggar, but maybe it is someone who just looks like him. The man says, I am the man. They bring him to the Pharisees. The Pharisees interrogate him. Because the healing happened on a Sabbath, they question his parents. His parents say, yes, this is our son. Yes, he was born blind. How he can now see we do not know. Ask him. He is of age. They are afraid to say more. So the Pharisees go back to the man. They argue that Jesus is a sinner because he violated the Sabbath. The man says something that is, in its plain directness, one of my favorite lines in the entire New Testament. Whether he is a sinner I do not know. One thing I do know. I was blind, and now I see. I was blind, and now I see. The Pharisees push further. How did he do it? Tell us again. And the man, clearly getting tired of this conversation, says, I told you already and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? They throw him out. And then, and this is the detail that makes this the most complete miracle story in the Gospels. Jesus hears that they threw him out and goes and finds him, and reveals himself to him fully. The man who was healed meets Jesus twice. First, he receives sight. Second, he receives faith. And Jesus says, for judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind. The miracle of physical sight becomes a parable about spiritual sight. The man who was born blind, who never asked for anything, who simply obeyed, go wash, ends up seeing more clearly than everyone else in the story, while the religious leaders who could see perfectly could not see at all. Luke 17. Jesus is traveling. 10 men with leprosy call out to him from a distance. They had to keep their distance by law. Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. And Jesus says, go show yourselves to the priests. That is it. No touch. No prayer spoken over them. Just, go to the priests. Because the priests were the ones who would officially certify a person as clean. If Jesus was saying, go show yourselves to the priests, he was saying, by the time you get there, you will be clean. And as they went, they were cleansed. And one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back. He came back to Jesus, praising God with a loud voice. He fell on his face at Jesus' feet. He gave thanks. And then the detail that makes this story sting a little. He was a Samaritan, not a Jew, not someone from the covenant people. The one who came back, the one who understood what had happened to him, was the outsider, the one that the religious establishment of the day would have considered further from God. And Jesus asks, with a tone that I think carries genuine sadness in it, were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? Where are the 9? They received the miracle and kept walking. They got what they needed and continued on to the priests without a backward glance. Only one turned back. I do not think Jesus tells this story to make us feel guilty about the times we do not say thank you, though that is worth reflecting on. I think he tells it because of what happened to the one who turned back. Jesus says to him, rise and go. Your faith has made you well. The same Greek word used for well here is the same word used for saved. Sozo, made whole, saved, healed in the deepest possible sense. All 10 were physically healed, but only one received something more, something deeper than clean skin. The miracle found its fullest meaning only in the one who turned back. There is something in that, something important. A great storm arises while Jesus and the disciples are crossing the Sea of Galilee. Waves are breaking over the boat. The disciples, several of whom are experienced fishermen who grew up on this lake, are terrified. And Jesus is asleep in the stern, on a cushion. The disciples wake him. Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And he wakes up, and rebukes the wind, and says to the sea, peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Mark says he rebuked the wind and said to the sea, be still. The Greek word translated be still is phemu, which literally means, be muzzled, like silencing an animal. He does not ask the storm to stop. He does not pray to the Father about the storm. He speaks to the storm directly, with authority, the way you speak to something that is under your command. And then he turns to the disciples. Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? And they are filled, not with relief, but with great fear. Who then is this, that even wind and sea obey him. They were afraid of the storm before. Now they are afraid of the one who stopped the storm, because they have just witnessed something that, in the Jewish understanding, only God could do. Because Psalm 107 verse 29 says, "He made the storm be still, and the waves of the sea were hushed." That he, in the psalm, is God. They are on a boat with someone who just did what Psalm 107 says only God can do. No wonder they are afraid. And no wonder the question that comes out of their mouths is not "thank you," but "who is this?" Because that is the question that the entire Gospel of Mark is trying to answer. And every miracle is a piece of evidence in the case. This story has always made me smile before it makes me cry. Jesus is in a house, teaching. The house is so packed that there is no room, not even near the door. Every available inch has a person standing in it. And 4 friends bring their paralyzed friend to Jesus. But they cannot get through the crowd. There is no way in. So they go up onto the roof. In first-century Galilean construction, roofs were flat, accessible, and made of packed earth, straw, and wooden beams. The 4 men dig through the roof. They make a hole large enough to lower their friend down. And they lower him on his mat, directly in front of Jesus. I want to pause here on the faith of these 4 friends. They did not have a way in, so they made one. They did not take their friend home when the crowd was too thick. They went up. They dug through a stranger's roof. They lowered their friend through a hole in the ceiling into a crowded room. The text says, when Jesus saw their faith, not his faith, their faith, the faith of the 4 friends. The man on the mat received a miracle because of what his friends did for him. And the miracle Jesus performs first is not the physical healing. He says, "Son, your sins are forgiven." The religious leaders in the room are immediately troubled. Who can forgive sins but God alone? And Jesus, reading their thoughts, the text says, responds, "Why do you question these things in your hearts? Which is easier, to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Rise, take up your bed and walk'? And then, 'But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. I say to you, rise, pick up your bed, and go home.' And immediately the man rose, picked up his bed, and went out before them all." The healing is performed as proof of something larger, as evidence for a claim. The man's legs work, so you will know that the forgiveness is also real. The visible miracle is a sign pointing toward the invisible one. And the people are amazed, and they glorify God. We never saw anything like this. 4 friends dug through a roof. A man was lowered through the ceiling. And something happened in that room that day that had never happened on earth before. I need to ask you something before we go into the final miracles. Do you have 4 friends who would dig through a roof for you? And, more importantly, are you one of the 4 for someone else? Because the paralyzed man did not ask to be brought to Jesus. He was carried by people who decided that his healing mattered as much to them as it did to him. That is a kind of love that the world does not talk about enough. The love that does not wait for someone to ask for help. The love that looks at a problem and says, "We are going through the roof." If this video is connecting with you, please like it and share it. Not for us, for the person in your life who needs to hear about 4 friends in a roof and a man who walked home with his mat. We have a few more miracles to cover. And I want to make sure we give them the weight they deserve. Because the final miracles of Jesus, the ones right before the cross, are the ones that carry the full weight of everything. Jericho. Jesus is leaving the city with a large crowd. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus. The text actually gives us his name, which is unusual and significant, is sitting by the roadside. He hears that Jesus of Nazareth is passing by, and he begins to cry out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." The crowd tells him to be quiet. This is always the crowd's first response in these stories. The crowd is management of access. The crowd decides who gets to be seen and heard. And Bartimaeus, blind, begging, by the road, is not on the list. But Bartimaeus cries out all the more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." He does not stop. He does not quiet down. He gets louder, and Jesus stops. The text says, "And Jesus stopped and said, 'Call him.' And the people said to him, 'Take heart, get up, he is calling you.' He throws off his cloak. He jumps up. He comes to Jesus. And Jesus says, 'What do you want me to do for you?' The same question he asked the disciples James and John just a few verses earlier, when they asked for thrones on his right and left hand. He asks Bartimaeus the same question he asks them. No hierarchy of need. No fast track for the important and waiting list for the beggar. What do you want me to do for you? Rabbi, let me recover my sight. Go your way, your faith has made you well. And immediately he recovers his sight. And he follows Jesus on the road. He throws off his cloak. That detail keeps stopping me. The cloak was how beggars collected alms. It was spread on the ground, and people would throw coins into it. That cloak was Bartimaeus' income, his livelihood, his survival. And he throws it behind him when Jesus calls. He leaves it, because he is already going somewhere that a begging cloak is not going to be needed. That kind of faith, the kind that throws the cloak before you even get the answer, is the kind Jesus calls your way. Go. It is already done. This miracle happens inside another miracle. Jesus is on his way to heal Jairus' daughter, a 12-year-old girl who is dying. He is pressing through a crowd, and in that crowd, a woman. She has had a bleeding condition for 12 years. 12 years of hemorrhaging. And in the Jewish law of that day, her condition made her ritually unclean, which meant she could not enter the temple, could not participate in community life, could not be touched without making the person who touched her also unclean. For 12 years she had been, in a very real sense, untouchable. She has spent everything she had on doctors, and gotten worse, not better. She comes up behind Jesus in the crowd, and touches the fringe of his garment, just the edge, the very outermost edge of his cloak, and immediately she feels in her body that she is healed. And Jesus, in a crowd that is pressing against him on every side, says, "Who touched my garments?" The disciples are almost incredulous. You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, "Who touched me?" Anyone could have touched you. Dozens of people are touching you right now. But Jesus felt, the text says, that power had gone out from him. He knows the difference between accidental contact and intentional reaching. He knows the difference between a crowd pressing and a person seeking. And the woman, trembling with fear, comes and falls before him and tells him the whole truth. Everything, the 12 years, the doctors, the money, the desperation, the fringe of his garment. And Jesus says to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." Daughter, not woman, not you. Daughter, a word of relationship, a word of belonging, a word that says, you are not unclean. You are not an outcast. You are not someone who snuck something that was not meant for you. You are mine, and you are healed. She reached for the fringe, and he called her daughter. I think about that word every time I read this story. She came in secret, full of shame, hoping no one would notice. And he stopped the whole crowd to name her, to claim her, to give her back not just her health, but her dignity, her place, her belonging. He could have just let her go. The healing had already happened, but he stopped everything to give her more than she asked for. That is the Jesus of the miracles. Not just healing, restoration, not just fixing the symptom, addressing the wound underneath the symptom, not just you are well, you are mine. While Jesus is still speaking to the woman, word comes from Jairus' house. Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? She is dead. The delay caused by the woman in the crowd cost Jairus his daughter's life. At least, that is how it looks. From the outside, Jesus overhears the message. He says to Jairus, "Do not fear, only believe." 4 words, in the middle of the worst moment of a father's life. In the moment when everything is lost and there is nothing left to believe for. Do not fear, only believe. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John, his inner circle, and goes to the house. There is a commotion outside, people weeping, wailing. He goes in and says, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping," and they laugh at him. He puts them all outside, takes only the parents and the 3 disciples, goes to where the child is lying, and he takes her hand, and says, and the text gives us the original Aramaic, which is rare, which means this phrase was so remembered, so specific, so unlike anything else that the early church preserved the exact original words. Talitha, cumi. Little girl, arise. And immediately, the girl got up and walked. 12 years old, the same number of years the woman had been bleeding. John's gospel is full of these symmetries. Mark's is too. The woman had suffered 12 years. The girl had lived 12 years. And in one afternoon, both of them were restored. The text says the people who saw it were overcome with amazement. And Jesus told them, strictly, to give her something to eat. That last detail, give her something to eat. After raising a 12-year-old girl from the dead, the first practical concern is, she must be hungry. She is a child. Feed her. The one who has power over death is thinking about whether the little girl has had lunch. That is the God of the miracles. Not a healing. Not a restoration. This one is different. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up a high mountain, and he is transfigured before them. His face shines like the sun. His clothes become white as light. And Moses and Elijah appear and talk with him. Moses, the one who received the law. Elijah, the greatest of the prophets. And Jesus, standing between them, talking with them. Peter, because Peter always feels the need to do something, says, Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He is still talking when a bright cloud overshadows them. And a voice from the cloud says, This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. And when the disciples lift their faces, Moses and Elijah are gone. And Jesus only is there. Not 3 tents. Not Moses and Elijah preserved in permanent monuments. Just Jesus. Only. And as they come down the mountain, Jesus tells them not to tell anyone what they have seen until the Son of Man is raised from the dead. I want to sit in what this miracle is, because it is not like the others. The others are all done for someone else. For the blind man, the leper, the dead girl. This one is done for the disciples, for their strengthening, for their preparation for what is coming. They are about to go to Jerusalem. Jesus is about to be arrested, tried, beaten, crucified. Everything they have believed in, followed, given their lives for, is about to look, from the outside, like complete and total failure. And God gives them a mountain, a moment of glory, a glimpse behind the curtain, not so they can escape what is coming, so they can survive it. Sometimes, the miracle is not for the person in front of you. Sometimes, the miracle is for you, to prepare you, to show you something you are going to desperately need to remember, when everything looks like it has fallen apart. They remember it. Peter, in his letter, written decades later, still talks about the holy mountain, still carries the memory of the voice, still holds the light. Some miracles are meant to be carried for years, before you fully understand why you were given them. And then we come to the one that makes all the others make sense. Jesus is arrested, tried, crucified, buried in a sealed, guarded tomb. 3 days. And on the 3rd day, early in the morning, before dawn, Mary Magdalene comes to the tomb. The stone has been rolled away. The tomb is empty. The burial cloths are lying there. The cloth that had been on his head, folded separately, placed neatly aside. The disciples come. They see. They go home confused. But Mary stays, weeping outside the tomb. She looks in, and sees 2 angels sitting where Jesus had been lying, one at the head, one at the feet. They ask her, Woman, why are you weeping? They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him. She turns, and sees a man standing there. She does not know it is Jesus. She thinks he is the gardener. He says, Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking? And she says, in the most heartbreaking line in the entire gospel, Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. I will take him away. She is offering to carry a body, alone, because she does not know what else to do. And Jesus says, Mary. Just her name. 1 word. And she knows. She turns and says to him in Hebrew, Rabboni, teacher. He was there the whole time, standing right there, and she did not recognize him until he called her by name. That is the resurrection. Not a philosophical argument for life after death. Not a theological proposition about the immortality of the soul. A man calls a woman by her name in a garden at dawn, and everything that was lost is found. All of the miracles, the water into wine, the blind eyes opened, the deaf ears unstopped, the lepers cleansed, the dead raised, all of them point to this. Not just that Jesus could do extraordinary things, but that the one who did them could not be held by death, that the grave was not the end of the story, that the one who wept for Lazarus was himself wept for, and then stood in a garden and called a woman's name, and she turned and he was there. Risen, real, present. Do not be afraid. I said at the beginning of this video that the miracles of Jesus are a portrait, a sustained piece of communication, not in words, but in events, in encounters, in moments where human need met divine response, and something happened that had never happened before and has never fully stopped happening since. And as I have been sitting with all of these stories, going back through them, one by one, something strikes me about the portrait that emerges. It is not a portrait of power, exactly, though the power is undeniable. It is a portrait of attention. Jesus notices the man nobody else notices at the pool. He notices the woman who reaches for the edge of his cloak. He notices the blind beggar the crowd is telling to be quiet. He notices the widow whose son has just died in Nain. And the text says, when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her. He saw her. He noticed her grief. And he acted. In story after story, the miracle begins not with Jesus performing, but with Jesus noticing, paying attention to the person that everyone else is walking past. And what he notices, he responds to, without being asked, in some cases. The widow at Nain does not ask Jesus to raise her son. She is too far into her grief to ask anything. He simply sees her, and his heart goes out to her, and he acts. The miracles of Jesus are a portrait of a God who pays attention, who does not look past you in a crowd, who does not rank you by importance before deciding whether your need is worth stopping for, who does not require the right words or the right prayer or the right level of faith before noticing that you are sitting by a pool or reaching for a fringe or lying in a tomb. He notices, and he responds. That is the portrait, and I believe, with everything in me, from everything I have read and studied and wrestled with and returned to again and again, that it is still being painted, right now, in lives that no camera can film and no gospel can record. In the moments when you felt seen and you did not know why. In the door that opened when every other door was closed. In the person who said exactly the right thing at exactly the right moment, in ways that no one but you understood. In the thought that came to you in the dark, that gave you the courage to get up one more time. The portrait is still being painted, and somewhere in it, I believe, is you. We have covered a great deal of ground today. From a wedding in Cana where stone water jars became the best wine of the evening, to a garden at dawn where a woman's name was called, and she turned and found that everything she had lost was standing right in front of her. Blind eyes opened, deaf ears unstopped, lepers cleansed, the dead raised, storms silenced in the middle of the night, 4 friends digging through a roof, a woman reaching for the edge of a garment in a crowd, a father told to do not fear at the worst moment of his life, and finding out that what looked like the end was not. Every single one of these stories points in the same direction, toward the one who wept before he raised Lazarus. Who noticed the woman in the crowd? Who stopped everything to call Bartimaeus by name? Who said daughter to someone who had been untouchable for 12 years? Who stood in a garden at dawn and said Mary? Not a distant God, not a transactional God, not a God who requires the right formula before paying attention. A God who notices, who stops, who weeps, who calls you by name. If you have been watching this and something has been stirring, I want to ask you to do one thing. Just one. Tell me in the comments which miracle in this video is the one you needed today. Not the most impressive one, not the most famous one. The one that landed. The one that felt, somehow, like it was told for you. I genuinely want to know. And please subscribe to All Religious Story if this is your first time here. Every week we tell these stories, the Bible, the Quran, the prophets, with the honesty and the depth and the human weight they deserve. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that they are not invisible, that the one who stopped the whole crowd to find out who touched the edge of his cloak notices them too. Because he does. He always has. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.